reasonable to bring it? Sure. One idea that I just wanted to throw out there that we were discussing, I guess, last night with Tom and Mark and some other people was the notion that on a triggered message in the PIM protocol now, if the initial join, particularly for joins, if a join message is lost, then you're waiting 30 seconds to recover, for 60 seconds to recover from that until the next periodic interval. And one thing that we were considering as an option would be to have a negotiable option to acknowledge joins and on a per SG, per star G basis. And this would also be, is also pretty important if you're trying to do explicit tracking as well of PIM join neighbors. So I wonder if anybody has any input on this. Obviously this is not, this needs some thought and we would come up with a proposal for this, but does anybody think this is either a good idea, has been wanting this, or think this is a bad idea and we shouldn't do this? I'm sort of leaning in favor of doing it. But
so I can see why it might make more sense for the explicit tracking. The problem we have with that is that we have really not specified anything about explicit tracking in the spec. So if we were to do something like that, we would really have to do a lot more work in saying what needs and doesn't need to be done with explicit tracking.
Okay. Dave?
Can you say something about what the real motivation is? Is this something that's theoretical, or is this something that you're actually observing that happens all the time today?
No, I think this is still theoretical at this point.
In that case, I would suggest that it not be changed, that I would prefer to leave it the way it is. I would take an analogy as like duplicate address detection. When you first do stuff, you're going to send out this claim to say, is anybody else out there? And this is true in V4 and in V6. And in V4, the original specs were you send out 3 of them at 1-second intervals. And in V6, they said, well, turns out that this really isn't a problem, so by default, we're going to just send 1. And if you don't detect it then, chances are that one will be fine. And if that also applies to joins, the fact that, the chances of losing one are pretty negligible, then I don't think it's worth the extra complexity.
Okay, so you're saying networks don't generally lose these packets, and so why
I'm saying
bother?
unless you have evidence that losing joins is a problem today,
Okay.
don't touch it.
I was going to say that I don't mind if we work on this, but I think it would be a separate document with a separate hello option that said I do AX or something, and then it could be something that people did optionally. But I wouldn't want to hold up the spec with it.
I think in any case this wouldn't hold up the spec, and it would be an optional thing regardless.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much exactly the same thing Tom said, that we definitely don't want to hold up the main spec on this, and specifying it as a tiny little additional spec as you might possibly optionally do this if you negotiate it in this way doesn't seem like it's going to cause any harm.
Yeah,
And, it would give you an opportunity to use it in cases where this would be an issue.
Yeah. There are other things that when you run into the point where you stop dropping joins, there are other issues that you may want to modify as well, like you may want to extend the join interval from 60 seconds to a larger value, and then we might want to add a hello option to say this is the join interval I want to negotiate with you, and things like that. So I think it can be looked at in the greater context of scaling.
Yeah, if you wanted to run PIM over relatively low bandwidth links, then it starts to become an issue, and you want to be able to scale back the timers, and so having the AX lets you do that relatively safely. If you want to run this over wireless, where you probably get link packet loss, then it becomes useful and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. But it should be considered in those contexts because there's other things that need to be done as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
I'd like to inquire about something totally different, if you're done.
If you're going to change topics, I'll just make one last comment that while I don't have any strong objection to the behavior, I wouldn't want to see the working group kept open just for theoretical things. Right? If there's evidence that, if there's actually people trying to do stuff on satellite links or wireless links, and it is a problem, then once the PIM sparse mode and dense mode specs are done, I'd like to hope that we're actually spending our working group time on things that people are actually needing. And so if there's a need for it, great. If there isn't, don't hold the working group open for it would be my preference.
But I'll miss you guys.
I just wanted to inquire if there's a feeling for a need for a new PIM-MIB draft or revision or whatever. I've noticed that many of the things for dense mode are just not there. I would do it, but I'm not really familiar with the sparse mode things and considerations, and would feel much more comfortable with someone more familiar with sparse mode doing it.
Good point. Is there their interest in doing another rev of the MIB?
So actually, I think there is another rev of the MIB in progress to deal with V6, because the RFC one is V4 only. Now, I don't remember whether the last V6 draft that actually went out, because it's been a while, was up to date with the generic V4, V6 MIB addresses. There's basically this new RFC that says, here's how you do generic stuff. And I don't know, Andy, do you remember whether that stuff was in the last PIM V6 MIB, or whether it was just V6 only? You think it was V6 only? Yeah. So perhaps what we should do is just do a MIB that is independent and incorporates what you want to do.
Okay, so Dave, are you coordinating that then?
I think I'm listed as one of the co-authors on that existing draft, along with Andy and one or two other people, and so I'm willing to help with it, but I hope that there are several other people willing to help too. I don't know if you're on it, Brian. I can't remember who's on that one. So.
Okay, we'll assume that the current authors of the MIB will all contribute to revving that. If you run into resource trouble, send it to the mailing list and say you need more help. Okay, thanks. I think we're done.